What's up, everybody? Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever it is that you are. Welcome again, and thank you for coming to Love Me, the podcast. I'm Ashley Dion, and thank you for joining me for today's episode, and it's called, quote unquote, Crazy House. On today's episode, we're going to talk about checking in with ourselves, the fight, flight, or freeze response, and healthy coping mechanisms. So, how have you guys been doing lately? You know, with everything going on in the world and social media and the news, are you checking in with yourself? I mean, there's nothing wrong if you haven't checked in with yourself, but sometimes moments when you need to check in with yourself are like if you're feeling different than you normally do. I know for me, I've had problems with checking in, and I felt like I needed to check in. I didn't know it at first. I was feeling a little down, a little out, and I just noticed a difference in me. And maybe I was overthinking, I'm not gonna lie. I was thinking about a whole lot of stuff, and I was just overwhelmed, and I didn't take the time to check in with myself, and I overloaded. You know, when you don't check in with yourself, sometimes you burn out. Sometimes you overwhelm yourself. And that's just a tool in my toolbox that I use, and be aware of it, that it's there. If I'm not feeling 100%, why am I not feeling that way? You know, am I thinking about something from work? Is it something that's in my environment? Is it something else that's on my mind? Is something been taking over my thoughts? Or what's happening in my personal life? And just being aware of that is the start. You don't have to handle it in that moment because we all have lives. I get it. But for me right now, things like social media have been driving me crazy. So I've had to take a break, and I had to learn that as of like this last few months. And I didn't realize how much of a toll it was really taking on me. It's like constantly being visually overloaded, hearing people's opinions and all of this noise. The noise is what gets you. And it's hard to just not pay attention to the noise because we're in the habit of being on our phones all the time. We're in the habit of having conversations about everything, but there's always a time and a place. And so the biggest lesson that I learned is from my childhood. You know the phrase, what happens in this house stays in this house? But that's something that I learned. That is I'm not going to say a lesson, but that was law. You know what I'm saying? So whatever happens in your household, like you don't even talk about it with the people within your household. You know what I'm saying? In the house, you keep it in. You don't communicate about it. Don't talk about it. You might think about it, but it's like whatever happens in Fight Club stays in Fight Club. You know what I'm saying? You know, and it's the same thing that's translated over into my life now. And I feel many other people's lives. And we have that mentality where what happens in our minds just stays there. We might not talk about it. We'll think about it. We might not delve too deep into why we're feeling that way about it, but we know we're feeling something. And with that mentality, sometimes it can breed the fight, flight, or freeze response. So any type of stress or traumatic experience that happens within our lives and in our households or things growing up that affects us as adults. And so if you don't address it, or you know, at some point in time in your life, it can affect you. And so with the fight, flight, or freeze response, sometimes it's our response. Like I said, it's our response to stress. Stress happens in the home. Stress happens at work. Stress happens everywhere. And so when we're in a constant state of fight, flight, or freeze all the time and stress, such as seeing all these visuals all the time, it's not good. It's not healthy for you. Your brain is in a state of high beta, and high beta is that fight, flight, or freeze response. High beta is like survival mode. And when you're seeing visuals and you keep reliving those moments and stressful moments, not just the visuals that you're seeing, but those visuals are bringing your brain up to those high beta waves. And your brain is just acting fight, flight, or freeze, and people are acting out. People are angry, and when you don't handle some kind of stress, it manifests itself later in your behaviors. And I know for me it did. Like, after seeing everything, I was so upset and riled up, and my emotions were all over the place and being mismanaged. I cried. I was angry for a part of the time, and it even affected me with my Facebook and a relationship with my mentors. We got into it for like a second. I'm not gonna say we got into it, but we agreed to disagree, and I posted a meme. The meme said, "The KKK burned down churches, businesses, and whatnot. Target will be alright." That's what somebody wrote. I didn't come up with that meme, but I shared it because in that moment I was angry. I was on social media scroll, and there's some things I choose not to post. And the things that I do post, occasionally I'll post something a little on the wild side. I don't even think it's that wild, to be honest with you. But I posted something and he commented and said, "Yeah, but what about the people who lost their jobs and their hours are cut or their businesses have been burnt down?" I get what he's saying, and I respect that. But in that moment, I got defensive a little bit. And I was just like, I was talking about Target. Target will be all right. I said what I said. Target will be all right. You know what I'm saying? But that wasn't right for me. But my feelings are valid, as well as his feelings are valid. Now, when people's feelings are valid out here. But just because they're valid doesn't mean they're right. And that's a whole another animal, which we'll get into in another episode. So back to the story. We went back and forth and had talks. And I get what he was saying, but my moment in posting that specific post and that meme, one, I didn't create it. Two, I was just sharing something because that's how I was feeling. And with that, everybody responds to things differently. So his response was, and it brought things to light. Like, his response was just, we're burning our own buildings and businesses and it's not right. And so, cool, we agreed to disagree because I have a friend that came onto the same post and she was like, "You're basically justifying the KKK." And I'm not saying whether he was or wasn't. I don't think he was. But sometimes people have things that they say and you just kind of like stick to what exactly I'm saying. Like, all I'm saying was Target. It wasn't anything more, anything less. It wasn't that deep. But I got what I had to get off my chest by sharing memes. But again, social media, that was like unnecessary stress. I said what I said. I shared a meme. The things that he did say were valid. He had valid points, and my friend had valid points. But the thing is, our feelings are all valid, right? They might not be right. They might not be correct in the way we go about them. And express those feelings. The purpose of checking in with yourself is basically the concept of check yourself before you wreck yourself. Check in with yourself before it gets to a point where you're stressed out and you get overwhelmed. But everybody's not an MLK. Everybody's not a Malcolm X. Everybody's not a rioter or a looter. Some of us don't say much. Like, it's okay. Wherever you're at, it's okay to be overwhelmed. It's okay to be sad or feel whatever you're feeling, but you have to check in with yourself so it doesn't go way, way down the line somewhere or go down the rabbit hole, so to speak, of thoughts. And for me, I know, like, it was crazy. It's a crazy house in my mind. And that's when I realized I was just in a state of almost being overly defensive and angry and mismanaging my feelings. And it's just like, why is this a crazy house right now? And then I realized What happens in my mind stays in my mind. What happens in this house stays in this house. And so I was holding things in my mind and going and reverting back to that old mindset. And that's a part of why I started this podcast. It's so many things, the reasons why I started this podcast, which will be another episode. But it's like, what do you want for yourself? What do you, if you're feeling like you're upset and you're starting to get upset when you're watching the news, or you feel like you're in a state of high beta, like you feel like fight or flight, things have been scaring people. You know, there's no reason people should be planning to go pack up all their stuff and move and go to a cave and live under a rock. You know what I'm saying? It's a lot going on. I get it. But watching all these visuals is sometimes too much. And then you have to keep in mind what your children are seeing, what you're seeing, what your parents are seeing, and so on and so forth. It's a lot and it's stressful, and it's okay to unplug. It's okay to pause, to slow down and just take a moment for yourself and realize, is that what you need? Realize your feelings and be aware of what you're feeling in that moment. And then later, allow yourself to process those feelings. And that's where we're going to transition now into coping mechanisms. Now, there are a number of things you can do as coping mechanisms to reduce the stress that you've gotten from whether the fight, flight, or freeze. And it might not necessarily be that. It might not be a trauma, but some of these things that are on TV and these occurrences that are happening bring up feelings for people. They bring up old feelings from their past. Again, it could be from the household. It could be from work, somebody, a friend, any type of situation that was overly stressful, traumatic. And you don't know what other people are feeling. You don't know unless you ask. But what about yourself? What about you? Ask yourself. Love yourself enough to ask the question. How am I feeling? How am I doing right now? And I'm not going to lie, like that was a hard question to ask, because sometimes I used to sit and be like, I don't know. I don't know how I'm feeling. And I would receive that question in a way when I asked myself, like, how am I feeling? I would think about what's making me feel this way. And that's not the question. The question is, how am I feeling? Am I feeling sad? Am I tired? Am I happy? Am I in deep thought? Because that happens a lot. I'll be in deep thought, and then I will have to go from there and be like, well, what am I thinking about that's got me in such deep thought? Is it a positive or negative thought? Where is this taking me? And so sometimes I will, if I couldn't deal with it in that moment, I'll deal with it later. Go take a walk, go to the gym, and burn it off. Think about it some. Sometimes you can go to therapy, or you can talk to your friends about it, because they might be going through the same thing too, or have advice. And I posted it on my IG. I posted it on Sunday on IG about coping mechanisms. So we have healthy coping mechanisms, like ways to de-stress, right? Some people garden. I know one of my friends, she talks about her gardening, and gardening is great. You're outside, you're getting sunlight, getting some vitamin D, and just enjoying nature. You can also dance or listen to music. A lot of people I know dance, and I also know people who make music, so they're creative like that. There are also some other creatives, like some people are taking pictures. They do photography. They do short films. That's their way of de-stressing. It's a little stressful as well, but some stress is necessary. Prayer, the power of prayer, the power of meditation. If you can really tap into your mind in such a way like that, You can look at what you're grateful for, what you're thankful for, what's going on, and pray for an answer. Or you can meditate to get your mind silent and focused and being in that moment. And sometimes you get clarity. There's clarity in silence. And that brings us to the next way to de-stress that's very, very underrated. And a lot of people find it hard to do. Sit still. When was the last time you sat down? Not on the couch, not in the bed. When was the last time you sat down at a desk? When was the last time you sat down at your kitchen table and just sat? I'll say 30 minutes to an hour a day. When was the last time you did that in a day? You'd be surprised if you just sit in silence. And it gives you time to think about your thoughts and your feelings, and you might not even realize that's going to come up. You just try it. Anyway, another way to de-stress is unplugging from social media. I had to limit my time on social media to, a few hours or literally just what I needed. So for me, I get on Facebook Marketplace. I get on, get off. Check my messages, get off. I don't even check my feed anymore sometimes. And I have to choose. So I have a Twitter account. I don't even use Twitter. I barely know how to use it. But I do use IG. I use my LinkedIn. I use Facebook and Meetup and a few other things on top of checking my email. Well, I had to limit that to email and IG. And then occasionally I'll get on Facebook. But that's what it is. And in IG, it's so much so that I had to really limit myself to freaking a few scroll. All right, cool. Once I feel that it might be a little heavy, because then I'll feel stuff is heavy, and I'll check in myself when I feel weighted or weighed down, and I'll be like, man, is this serving me right now? Like, let me check in with myself. Like, how am I feeling? I'll be like, oh, I'm feeling heavy. And I'm like, oh, you know what that means, Ashley? It's time to go. So I hop my little behind off of IG and I just pause. Another way, reading books. I've become more of an avid reader than I ever have been before in my life. And reading, honestly, is a great getaway, especially finding what you're interested in. And all of that with having a support system or therapy or your crew, that feels great when you're heard. When you actually process things or when you're heard, it makes you feel good, and you just have to be patient with yourself through all of this. Whatever it is you're feeling, whatever it is you're going through, you don't have to rush it. Make sure you check in with yourself and pause. It's okay to take a minute. It's okay to not be doing all the things that you want to be doing all the time. So what do you guys do to cope? What are coping mechanisms, or what are ways that you de-stress? Like I said, when I know one of my friends, she said gardening and being outside. I have quite a few friends that are into fitness. I have friends who are into cooking. So what do you do? What do you do to de-stress? Also, how do you recognize those feelings when you need to check in? With that being said, that pretty much sums it all up. We live in a time where things are different, things are ever changing. We're always switching lanes. It's like we're driving the Ferrari or the Lambo of life. With everything in the news and social media, things are fast and they're so go, go, go. And it gets overwhelming sometimes. And it's okay, like I said, to pause. I don't know if you have the what happens in this house stays in this house mentality, because everybody has their own things that they've learned. What are things that you learned from your household? We shouldn't let our old mindsets come back to our present, because there's a lesson to be learned. So let's keep up with that and follow through with the lessons that we're learning and the ways to de-stress that we're learning as well, and what works for you. It's because what works for you might not work for somebody else. What works for me might not work for you. I love to cook. I like taking walks. I like hog maws. I like pig feet. No, I'm playing. I like to quote Friday. Craig's daddy, I like to quote from Friday all the time. But no, on a serious note, and closing this segment, what other ways do you guys like to de-stress? Like cook, run, breathe, just take a breath of fresh air, breathing exercises, meditation, prayer. I mean, light therapy. Light therapy is underrated as well. Talk to me. I'm here. I'm listening. So I hope you all enjoyed this podcast. You can catch me on IG at The Art of Ashley with underscores. So it's _art_of_Ashley on IG. So I'll leave y'all with this as closing. Learn to de-stress and love yourself, because I love me. Y'all have a good morning, evening, or afternoon. Thank you all for joining, and I'll catch you on the next episode of Love Me next Tuesday.